Hi everyone, this is Henry again. Bit of a fun video today. Wanted to go ahead and start doing a few tier list videos just because I think they're a lot of fun. They get some community discussion going. I can enjoy a bunch of people in the YouTube comments or on Discord tagging me and telling me how stupid I am and how I am objectively wrong on a lot of these. But I look forward to that. I look forward to that discussion. So I thought this would be a fun video to put out. I really encourage any of you who have opinions on it, please share them in the comments. I'd be happy to hear them, happy to have discussions. Just a quick update, Second Chance of Vassal World Cup. I forgot to record round 3. Something I thought I saved the log file. Apparently I didn't. That's on me. Didn't miss much. I got absolutely bodied. Went up against CIS 3 large ships with Raidbot. So it did not go well. I played terribly. I flew terribly. We're going to forget about all that. I went ahead and dropped out of the tournament. I have some real life stuff I need to focus on next week. Didn't really want to try to get a game in. So yeah, that's that. I again apologize for no videos for the rest of that World Cup. But your boy didn't do great, so you're not missing a whole lot. Anywho, let's get into this tier list. Start having some fun. I'm going to start out here with, arguably the most vanilla commander in the game, which I feel like is a good way to start. It's Majdi. I'm going to put Majdi in B tier, kind of right in the middle. He doesn't really help you win as directly as some other commanders do, but his ability is almost always relevant. Being able to unconditionally gain hull on your ships depending on size is always nice. It sometimes helps you save points that you would otherwise lose. It can help make things super tanky to the point where your opponent doesn't really want to shoot them as much. But that being said, he works better in lists with larger ships. And there are a lot of commanders that actually actively do things more to help you win throughout the game rather than just give you the extra hull. So he's good, not great. I don't think that B tier is a super controversial place for him. I think he's just kind of, if you really, really can't think of anyone else to put in your fleet and you don't want to take one of the 20-point commanders, I guess you take Majdi because you can just kind of set it and forget it. You really don't have to really don't have to think about him. So, B tier for Majdi. Next up, we've got Thrawn, one of the coolest characters in Star Wars. I'm going to put him in A tier. He's very good. I'm going to say he's not great. He's not in that top echelon. 32 points, that can sometimes be a bit much, depending on your fleet composition. There's a lot better or a lot cheaper commanders that I would say are better in a lot of cases. But Thrawn has kind of always been good. Before 1.5, after 1.5, he's still always been good. The ability to have those dials on whatever ships you want, on all your ships, and have those dials be whatever you want that are unsliceable, unchammable. It's a very, very effective. Most of the time you see him in a list with squads or something, so you can do whatever you want with your ships and then Thrawn dial your squads, or alternatively do the inverse, like have squad dials on your ships and then let everyone nav or let everyone repair. I've seen him used in a multitude of lists. He's always kind of been relevant, meta relevant. He was arguably the best commander in the game for a while, pre 1.5 with Thrawn 2 ship. I guess I wouldn't say he was the best commander in the game at that point, but that list in particular was probably the best list for a long time. And he hasn't fallen much from that. I think he's still very good, just not top tier. Next, let's get to one that's pretty sad for me. Good old Screedy boy. I'm going to put him in C tier. Admiral Screed has definitely seen better days. He with Piet and the evade changes and all that kind of stuff in 1.5, there's a lot of ways to get rid of crits, especially when you only roll 1. Your opponent is going to have a pretty easy time getting rid of that crit. And for that reason, I think he dropped. I think pre 1.5, he was maybe a B tier commander. He's pretty average, but a lot of fun to use. But now you really, really have to justify using him. Just because that ability at 26 points, I don't think is super worth it. You have to spend a die, and you can only do it once per activation. So that's already kind of 2 dings against him. And then setting something to a face with a crit is only really good in today's meta if you already have something with showing a crit, so your opponent can't get rid of it. So like if you're fishing for an APT, or you're fishing for, I don't know, like a highs or something, you need to have 1 die naturally in your pool coming up a crit, and then screed into a second crit, because most of your opponents are going to be having either Pedix and or evade, or other ways to targeting scramblers, other ways to reroll those dice. So I think he's fine, but he's really not great, and that's why I'm putting him in C tier. Up next, one of my favorite commanders to use right now, and someone who got a lot of love with 1.5, Admiral Ozil, and I'm putting him all the way up in A. He was not good pre 1.5. He just, I mean, you know how, I guess in the really early days of the game, you had Ozil Raiders, like Ozil MSU was a fun archetype, but he just really was not great pre 1.5. But now, he's genuinely a very good commander, not just because he's 20 points. His ability is always relevant. The fact that you now don't have to nav at all to be able to change that speed is fantastic. I think Ozil MSU is making a comeback. I played against it at LVO, a very good list there. I've enjoyed playing it myself, and I think it's something that is good for the game, that it exists, with how prevalent onagers are, or a bunch of like big ships, stuff like that. I think the diversity of having Imperial MSU in the meta is fantastic, and I think Ozil absolutely enables that. I think his ability by itself is very good, like I said earlier, and him being 20 points means he's always on the table when you need to save points. And I talked about how Majdi is a commander that if you really don't want to think too much about it, you just grab him. I think Ozil does that better. I think you can grab Ozil and you don't have to use Ozil's ability at all during the game, but it's always there for you, and it's not situational at all. It's not, you don't have triggers that you need to meet or stuff like that. You just, whenever you want, I'm going to increase or decrease my speed. And I think that's fantastic. So, top of A tier for Ozil. Next up, we've got Special K, and he is awful. He's truly terrible. He's a garbage commander who didn't get much better after 1.5. He was, there's a good saying that I think applies to Constantine. You can polish a turd until it shines, but then you just have a shiny turd. And I think that's what happened with Constantine. He got better in 1.5, but he's still not at all relevant. There's still too many triggers you have to meet for that ability to work, and the ability itself is not very good. I can't think of any list archetypes where you really want to use Constantine instead of someone else. Almost every commander in the game you can justify using because your fleet really, really, really works with it, right? But Constantine, you have to have the right fleet for it. You have to be able to do other stuff when you're discarding, when you discard navs from your opponent's ships, like nav tokens, or reduce their speed. You have to have some way to gain an advantage off of that. And yeah, it's annoying when your opponent discards a navigate token from your ship, but very rarely is that going to spell any kind of doom for you. And I think that for what he brings to the table, he just does nothing in a lot of games. His ability is really negligible in a lot of games. And so I'm putting him in F. I have flown him maybe a handful of times, both pre and post 1.5, and he's just really, really bad. So that's Special K. Next, we've got Piet, who I think is one of the most interesting commanders in Armada. 22 points makes him the 3rd cheapest commander that the Imperials have after Ramadi and Ozil. And his ability is actually quite good. The ability to just have another dial. is fantastic. You know, you got to have that. You know, you have to have a token for it already on the ship, but that's generally not that hard. And to every turn be able to take an extra dial on your command ship is pretty good. But you know, notice I said on your command ship because he only helps one ship. I guess I shouldn't say only the command ship. Just he only helps one ship because he's an exhaust, and so he can be very good. He's kind of like a what is it called? The tactical droid for the CIS. But you can put that on all your ships. Versus Piet, as your commander, only helping one ship per turn is not amazing. And gaining an extra dial is not always relevant. But all that being said, I think he's solid for sure. Obviously, his place is on the SSD. That's what he came with. Everybody knows that. And he's very, very good on the SSD, especially because you're getting free tokens and being able to do 2 commands in a turn with an SSD is very good. And you don't really care about your other ships in your fleet doing much. They don't really need that extra dial because most of the time it's either a small and a flotilla or 2 flotillas or maybe a small and 2 flotillas. But you're almost always just focusing on the SSD, and he's very, very good in that sense. But I don't know that I've ever seen him taken in any list that's not an SSD list. I think that speaks volumes to how niche he kind of is. So B tier, average commander. Next up, we've got, I guess, the new hotness, right? It's not that new anymore. And it's our first S tier. It's Ramadi. I think it's an easy S tier. I think that he does so much for 20 points. Like, even if he was 30 points, I think you absolutely still see him a lot. At 20 points, he is approaching like meta-defining status. He's not necessarily broken. He's absolutely undercosted. There's no question about that. But he in himself, I wouldn't say is broken. He really does a lot for you. And I'm going to go through the card here real quick to kind of go through my justification. If you're attacking a ship that is obstructed by a ship or obstacle, you not only do not remove the die, but you add a red die. That, I think, if he was like a commander that totally ignored obstruction, he'd be good. I don't think he'd be great, but he'd still probably be solid. But the fact that you not only ignore obstruction, which, every other list in the game has to deal with and lose dice, unless your Jaina's Light, every other list in the game has to deal with obstruction and lose the dice. And Ramadi says, not only do I not have to deal with that, I get a sizable advantage of adding a red die to the attack pool is a fantastic ability. Also, he kind of cancels out other commanders' abilities, like Kraken for the Rebels. If you're obstructed by an obstacle, then Kraken's obstruction he gives you goes away completely, and you're taking the extra die. Which I think makes him so good. And to top it all off, he comes in a sweet, tight 20-point package, which makes him the commander that when I don't specifically want to take Ozil, and I want to take a cheap commander, I take Ramadi. And in almost every other list I make where I'm thinking about who I want to run, if I don't specifically want to run another commander, I'm like, well, I might as well run Ramadi because I want to ignore obstruction, and I'm going to take free red dice when they're given to me. And so I don't think this is too controversial to put him in S tier. I think everyone kind of knows he's really good, and that's where he remains. Next up, we've got the Senate, and the Senate is going in C tier. He's not good. The Palpatine officer is amazing, and the Palpatine commander is really just not good. I have seen a few people make him work. I think his ability is interesting and fun, but it's just not good. The fact that you can't choose which defense tokens you put on him, and they have to be one of each type. You can't double up on anything, is part of what makes him bad. Another part of what makes him bad is 35 points. He is so severely overcosted. He reminds me of pre-1.5 Tarkin. I don't really know how it got through testing being this expensive. I guess they thought Yeah, 5 intel officers, that's 35 points, and that's what Palpatine is. But it just doesn't work out that way. Like I said, I've seen him work, and I think he's very fun for casual games. But competitively, at 35 points, you can save a lot of points and do a lot more with a lot of the other commanders who are already on this list. I'm looking at you two, who are almost half of what Palpatine is. These guys up here are better. Thrawn is 3 points cheaper, and Thrawn is so much better. Heck, I would consider for just list building sometimes Special K, because I could afford him instead of paying 35 points for Palpatine. So I think he'd be better if he was 10 points cheaper. Obviously, that's kind of a no duh moment right there, but I think he'd be run a lot more if he was cheaper. And because his ability is sometimes pretty good, but he's just so horrendously overcosted, and the ability is not always that impactful, that he's going to sit in C tier, below Screed. These are going to be ordered, by the way, and I'll go through that at the end. Next we have Darth Vader, one of my favorite commanders to play with. He's a lot of fun, very simple. I think he was a great early commander in Star Wars Armada, but just not quite. He doesn't quite have it anymore. 36 points is a lot for what you get, especially in the era of the fact that Sloane exists, and then Palpatine officer, and just not wanting to overheat your own defense tokens. His cost now of having to spend the defense token is a bit more relevant these days. But that being said, still a great ability, right? To be able to reroll any number of dice in your attack pool, I mean, that's great. 36 points, is a lot, but you can in some games, get 36 points worth of rerolls out of him. The biggest thing holding Vader back in 1.5, or actually just ever since the card came out, is the fact that Officer Vader now exists. And Officer Vader is one of the best officers in the game. For 1 point, I mean, come on. It gets you some clutch rerolls when you need it, and it's 1 point in an officer slot instead of using your commander and paying 36 points. So you have a bit of opportunity cost there now, which I think kind of keeps him a bit lower than maybe he could be. I think that's the reason you a lot of times don't see him as much anymore, because of Officer Vader, which is a shame. Officer Vader is super undercosted, and Darth Vader Commander is probably a bit overcosted now. But that being said, I still like him a lot. I think B tier feels right for him, where he's always like, oh yeah, okay, Vader. I gotta kind of pay attention to that if my opponent's running it, or if I'm running it, I'm absolutely going to use his ability throughout the game. But he's just not amazing, and so that's why he belongs in B tier. Next up, we got old Jerry. Jerry is joining Ramadi up in S tier. I think it speaks volumes that for years now, a lot of the top performing Imperial lists in tournaments and competitive play have been Jerry lists. And I got to be totally honest, Jerry was not a commander that I played much or even thought that highly of for a long, long time. And I think part of that is when you're new to Armada, you look at all the other commanders' abilities. You look at Vader being able to reroll all your dice. You look at Majdi literally changing the hull that's printed on your ships. Or you start to learn a bit more about the game. You look at Thrawn, you're like, wow, extra command dials. That's really, really good on all my ships. Jerry is one of the last commanders, I think, in your Armada learning experience that you realize how good he is. Because when you're new, you don't always put a whole lot of thought into maneuvering. And the fact that you can arc dodge with Jerry super easily. You can get double arcs on people with Jerry super easily. And you don't have to nav to get him, to get his ability. And suffering 1 damage on a shield in most cases is almost always negligible. You almost always have a hull zone that's not facing your opponent's ships. Or you can spend on most ships just a repair token to get that damage back. And so I don't think that the part of his ability that they gave him, the downside of suffering damage, is very relevant ever. and I think it's almost negligible, which is why for 23 points, the ability to get the double click at the first yaw of your current speed is very, very good. It's very efficient. And in terms of like a maneuverable commander, Ozil used to be terrible, and so of course if you wanted to be able to maneuver well and not have to nav as much, Jerry was your guy. With Ozil getting better, Jerry, kind of comes down a little bit, but I still think Jerry's the better commander. Points, it's a difference of 3 points. I don't think that's super relevant. I think Jerry is just a bit better than Ozil, and Jerry has the results, for lack of a better term. Even recently, even after Ozil got changed, Jerry's got the results that Ozil doesn't. And I think as long as Jerry continues to perform the way he is, he's going to be an S tier. And I think it's that ability with that cost, he's just too good to be any lower than S tier in my mind. However, I do have him below Ramadi, and I'll explain a couple things as we get towards the end. Next, we have Tag, and this might be the more controversial, one of the more controversial picks I have here. I'm not going to put Tag in an F. I am not going to put him in the Constantine tier. I'm going to put him at the bottom of C tier because I'm not stupid, but I'm going to keep him out of F tier, and here's why. 1.5 changes, whatever. You get to pick your rounds. You're almost always going to pick 3 and 5 anyway, so those changes don't change much. I guess some niche games you could pick like 4-6 if you're up against onagers on the opposite side of the board or something, or if you're planning the slow roll, or you could pick 2-4 if you're going to just run in guns blazing. But I can't imagine you're going to be discarding many tokens, defense tokens, turn 1. But whatever. So the change in his ability, not super relevant. But things have changed around him that I feel like make him a little bit better than he used to be, and in terms of this tier list, a little bit better than Constantine. I still think he's the second worst commander in the game, but he's better than Constantine. And the big reason I say that is because evades got better, which means you're going to be spending them more. So the ability to spend them out to like discard extra dice, or if they get intel officered, or if you just need to do it twice in a turn, or you get TRCs or something, the ability to grab those back with Tag, since evades got better, feels really good. On top of that, spoiler alert, Sloane is one of the best commanders in the game. And she's decently meta-relevant, particularly with Sloanager now. Sloane with an Onager and a bunch of squads and a Quasar and stuff. And so you have a lot of cases, and not even to mention like local fire control and salvos, wanting to double salvo people. I think defense tokens got a bit more important in 1.5. There's more things that give you defense tokens or spend defense tokens, stuff like that. And so I think the ability to get those back with Tag made him better. With everything changing around him, like I said, his ability change is totally negligible from 1.5. But the way the meta has changed around him, I think he's a bit better than he used to be, and for that reason he hops ahead of Constantine. Now, I'm not going to recommend you take him to Worlds or Adepticon or something if you haven't practiced with him. He's not someone you just slap into a list. You really have to have an idea of why you're taking him. But he's not the worst commander the Imperials have, and that's saying something for him. Coming around to the last two here, I've got Tarkin, and I'm putting Tarkin at the top of B tier. He used to be terrible because he was 38 points, but he got 10 points chopped off, and I think he feels a lot better at 28 points. I started playing Armada 3.5 years ago, I think, almost 4 years ago now. And I, from before 1.5, would have almost never considered taking him. Even early on in my Armada journey, I knew that he was not worth 38 points. And that only became more and more apparent as the game went on. But at 28 points, and with more things in the game using command tokens, I think he gets a lot better. Being able to give one command token, or give command tokens of one type to all your ships, can be really good. It saves you. You don't have to take like a munitions resupply or a parts resupply anymore. You can refresh stuff with a lot of things requiring refreshes like ECMs and those kind of cards. You can get those for free with Tarkin. You don't have to specify ahead of time what kind of commands you're using, so you can do it whatever you need at the top of each round. And at 28 points, he's kind of in the middle of cost-wise for Imperial commanders. And so I think he's good in a lot of lists. And for that reason, I'm putting him at the top of B tier. He just doesn't crack the top 5 of Imperial commanders for me. But I think he's very solid. And I look forward to seeing more Tarkin lists in the future. Lastly, we have probably my least favorite, most hated commander in the game. And I'm definitely not the only one with that opinion. We've got Sloane, and I'll just say it right up front. I think Sloane is the best commander the Imperials have. I think she's better than everyone else that they have. And I would say she might even be the best commander in the whole game. Some people might be scratching their heads saying, well, really, Sloane? I don't see Sloane all that often. That is because, A, you really have to play a certain type of list. Out of everyone in this list, she is the one that literally requires that you build around her because you have to have squads to make her work. And the second reason I think you don't see her very much is because I don't know how fun she is to play. I've played, half a dozen to 10 games with Sloane myself, and I don't really have a ton of fun with her because I can tell that I'm creating a bad play experience for my opponent. She's so uninteractive where, like, there are a lot of cards in the game, a lot of things in the game that are one-sided, like are very not interactive, and that's fine. But she is, like, so uninteractive, she, like, goes past it to where she is interacting with you by spending your defense tokens, and you are not interacting with her because there's nothing you can do about it. When she rolls up with Merrick Jendon and Merrick rolls, crit accuracy, she's like, okay, spend the redirect and take 1. You can't do anything about that 1. It's like, okay, I take the 1, and then she double taps him again, and she's like, oh, there's the accuracy again. Your redirect's gone for the rest of the game, unless you're tag. That's stupid. And I think she's the only Imperial commander in the game that I would say is game-breaking. She is broken. I don't know why her cost wasn't updated in 1.5. I guess because squads on the whole got a little bit worse just because of PDX and evade changes and stuff. But Sloane don't care about that. On Blue Dice ships, particularly Blue Dice bombers, I guess I'm really only talking about Merrick in that case, or generic defenders too. Any result's a good result for her, so PDX are useless, basically. And even against other ships, like generics or any kind of single blue die ship, she PDX or any kind of reroll, 75% chance she's doing something good. And I think the fact that she gets to spend and you don't get to do the effect at all, she gets to spend your defense tokens, it makes her one of the most hated commanders in the game. I think with the advent of Sloanager, I'll be straight up, I hate Sloanager as an archetype. I think it's arguably the most unfun list to play against in the game because you are dealing with Sloane, which is the most unfun commander, and the Onager, which is the most unfun ship. I'm not a big Onager hater. I kind of like that they're in the game. I like playing against them just because it prevents a new kind of challenge. I'll defend Onagers till the day I die. Not points-wise. Points-wise, they're kind of a mess, but that's a different story. But what I hate to think about is Sloanager as a list type because it's very, very good. It's, I think, hard to play well, which is why you don't see it all that much. I think it's a difficult list to master, but once you do master that list, I think it has one of the best matchup spreads in the game and is one of the most frustrating lists to play against in the game, and that's entirely because of Sloane. So this is the tier list. These are in order, and so I am saying that Sloane is number 1, followed by Ramadi and Jerry in 2 and 3, and then so on and so forth, with Constantine being terrible at the bottom. I'm sure that everyone watching this is going to have different opinions, and I absolutely welcome those. Just keep it civil in the comments or on Discord. But I hope you guys had fun. This was a fun thought exercise for me, a fun video to make. Like I said, if you have other opinions, agree or disagree, feel free to let me know. But yeah, this is what I've got. I plan to do a whole lot more tier lists and rankings in the future. I think they're a lot of fun. I should kind of wrap this all up by saying, you know, almost every card in the game, whether it's a commander or a ship or otherwise, almost everything in the game is usable in some way. And you can make almost everything work in the game. In terms of commanders, technically you can make any of these commanders work, and you can have a lot of fun, and they can be decently competitive. You know, Constantine remains to be seen. I've never seen a good Constantine list, but someone could crack it. But, you know, everyone else has had success in some way or another, and so, you know, ultimately, this is just all my opinion. It's totally subjective. I'm not going to say that any of these are objectively ranked. And B, any commander can work, right? And you know, the better player you are, the more success you're going to have, regardless of which commander you're playing. I'm just weighting these as my opinion of who I think are the best through my experience playing this game, and you know, who I am most worried to go up against / who I think I have the best chance playing with. But ultimately, like I said, it's just my experience, just my opinion, and so feel free to share your guys' opinions in the comments. But thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.